Summary. This is a suspenseful story about surviving a near-air disaster on the way to an Antarctic for an expedition with Chinese journalists, where this shared near-death experience shaped the passengers in profound ways. That year, I went to Antarctica with a Chinese journalist expedition team. The route was to fly from Beijing to New York, USA, then catch a connecting flight from New York to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and then fly to Ushuaia to board an icebreaker to the Great Wall Station in Antarctica. This has been one of the paths chosen by our country's Antarctic expedition team in recent years. When I was boarding the plane at Beijing Capital Airport, I suddenly received a call from a friend who said that the US and Iraq had started a war and told me to be careful. I turned off my mobile phone and laughed. Iraq doesn't have the capability to launch missiles at New York. Upon arrival in New York, we boarded a large Airbus capable of carrying more than 300 passengers to Buenos Aires at night. Due to the 13-hour journey, most of the passengers fell asleep after the plane took off. I, however, was passing the time by reading some Antarctic materials I brought along. About an hour later, a sudden flash of light outside the window illuminated the cabin as if it were daylight. I thought we had encountered the rumored UFO. However, when I glanced out the window, a terrifying flame spurted straight from the wing in front of me, and the fuselage began to shake violently. As if it was out of control, I was stunned. The first reaction that came to mind, my God, was it really hit by an Iraqi missile? The terror I felt blanked my mind, and I could only await the earth-shattering explosion that signified the airplane's destruction with despair. However, nothing happened. Most of the passengers in the cabin were awakened and flocked to the windows, tense, observing the wing still spewing fire and smoke. A flight attendant came over. As did the pilot. People were staring at their faces, trying to discern the gravity of the situation from their expressions. The cabin crew's faces were pale, and they did not answer any questions. Soon we were informed via the loudspeaker that due to engine failure, the plane was going to return. To prevent an explosion during landing, a large amount of fuel had to be discharged. Thus, I saw a white dragon-like jet of fuel being sprayed from below the wing, plunging towards the earth from tens of thousands of meters high, inspiring terror. The cabin was shrouded in the same massive unease, and some started to pray. A couple sat in the row in front of me, an American husband and wife with school-aged children. Their two children also sensed the tension in the cabin and looked up at their parents to ask them what was going on. Their mother took out a children's book and read to them softly, which made the children laugh. Later, she gently asked the flight attendant for 2 beautifully prepared snacks for them. After the children had finished their snacks, she fondly stroked their hair until they fell asleep, then held her husband tightly. I was deeply touched by this display of motherly love as I kept my gaze on her. Then I thought about what was I going to do. Sitting next to me was the general manager of a multinational company based in Jiangxi, who was also one of the sponsors of the expedition. He had been sleeping soundly and had no idea about what had happened on the plane. When I woke him up and told him about the situation, at first he thought I was joking. When he realized the gravity of the situation, he was obviously unsettled. The Taiwanese man who sat on my other side, who was in his 70s and had traveled around the world, with such experiences pretty well known in Taiwan, was leaning his white-haired head against the backrest of his seat with his eyes closed. I gently nudged him, and he opened his eyes slightly. I know. He said, I was curious. How come you are so calm? He closed his eyes again. What can one do other than remain calm? This is what is called fearlessness. His performance made me admire him at that moment, under his influence. I also gradually calmed down. What about Rulan? I suddenly thought of another female colleague. I found that she was sleeping very soundly. I'm not sure if she was dreaming about penguins or her mother, but she was actually smiling in her sleep. She and I are both reporters from the same city. Before the trip, her mother came to my house and asked me to take care of her daughter on the road. But at this moment, I'm afraid it's beyond God's power to help. I watched Rulan silently for a while and decided not to disturb her. If something were to happen, I would let her drift away in her dreams. At least she would not feel the unbearable fear. What followed was a period of tens of minutes that felt like a century. When the airplane returned to New York's airport at midnight, the airport was on high alert with police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks flashing like a neon rainbow. It was a scene I had only seen in hijack movies. The plane made a successful emergency landing. The cabin was filled with light, as if a blockbuster movie had just ended. After the close call, the passengers stood up all at once and started to hug each other. There was thunderous applause and cheering, almost overturning the ceiling of the cabin. My eyes were moist at that time. Zhao Hongsong, a fellow reporter who had been sleeping soundly since boarding the plane, opened his eyes and clapped fiercely with everyone else. He was puzzled and asked his seatmate, "Did we reach Argentina that fast?" People told him, "We were back in New York," which confused him even more. Then people curiously asked him why he was clapping. He sheepishly said he saw everyone else clapping, and he was afraid of being impolite if he didn't. Of course. Rulan also woke up. When she learned the truth, she kept complaining why she wasn't awakened. "I've lost such a unique life experience." Having been scared by the incident, I earnestly asked everyone, if a similar accident happens during a flight, please don't wake me up. 3 years later, when the whole world was joyously welcoming the arrival of the year 2000, the same Argentine passenger plane encountered engine failure in flight again. This time, more than 350 passengers didn't manage to escape their fate, and unfortunately, all of them died when I saw the news. I couldn't help but shed tears. Their attitudes in facing the air disaster have become an eternal mystery. However, whether it was being calm or afraid,